Today, we're going to deconstruct a story that is just absolutely chilling. It starts with a hopeful, excited message from a young woman on the trip of a lifetime, and it ends in a tragedy that grabbed the world's attention. We're breaking down the case of Grace Millane and the calculated, cold-blooded web of lies woven by her killer. This is how a Tinder date turned into a murder, and how a modern digital trail brought him to justice. This right here, this is just heartbreaking. This is the very last message Grace Millane ever sent to her friends. It's full of that excitement you feel on a really great first date, and she sent it just moments before her life was taken. It's such a tragic reminder of how quickly a situation can change. Okay, so let's walk through the timeline of that evening, December 1st, 2018. At 5:37 p.m., Grace leaves her hostel to meet Jesse Kempson. For the next few hours, CCTV cameras all over Auckland track them. They're sharing drinks, talking, laughing. Everything looks completely normal. Then, at 8:54 p.m., they share a kiss, and Grace sends that text message we just saw. By about 9:40 p.m., they're seen on camera entering his hotel. That is the last time anyone saw her alive. And this is where the story takes that incredibly dark turn. Grace was murdered in his hotel room that night. The very next day was supposed to be her 22nd birthday. As you can imagine, her phone was blowing up with messages from friends and family wishing her a happy birthday, but they all went unanswered. That silence was the very first sign that something was terribly, terribly wrong. So while Grace's family was just starting to worry, her killer was already executing a chillingly methodical cover-up. The morning after he killed her, he went on a shopping trip. And just look at this list. Each step is just so cold and calculated. First, a big suitcase. Then a bunch of cleaning products. He rents a car. And finally, he buys a shovel. There was no panic here. There was just a plan. What he does next is, well, it's just hard to wrap your head around. With Grace's body hidden in that suitcase in his hotel room, Jesse Kempson went on another Tinder date. He didn't even bother to change his clothes from the night before. I mean, the danger that this second woman was in, it was immediate and very, very real. This conversation is probably what saved that second woman's life. During their date, Kempson starts talking about the best ways to hide a body from the police. You can imagine her terror. She ended the date immediately. Her instincts were screaming that something was wrong, and thank goodness she listened to them. So after his date, it was right back to his mission. He was seen on CCTV bringing a carpet cleaner back to his room to get rid of any trace of Grace. Then he used one of those hotel luggage trolleys to move the heavy suitcase with her body down to his rental car before driving off to find a place to bury her. All right, so now let's turn to the investigation. As soon as Grace's family raised the alarm, the police in Auckland started retracing her last known steps. They knew that in a modern city like that, every single action leaves some kind of digital footprint. Following that trail was going to be the key to figuring out what happened to her. And the evidence started piling up fast. Investigators poured over hours and hours of surveillance footage, piecing together the couple's entire evening. They pulled credit card records. They used cell phone data to prove that Grace and Jesse were together at his hotel. And right as this digital net was closing in, Grace's dad made this heart-wrenching public plea for information, which turned a missing persons case into a massive national headline. And here's where he made a huge, huge mistake in his cover-up. That suitcase, the cleaning supplies, even booking an extra night at the hotel to give himself more time, he bought all of it using Grace Millane's own credit card. It created this undeniable financial link between everything he did to cover it up and his victim. When the police finally brought him in for questioning, Kempson's story started to crumble almost immediately. He lied about everything, even the smallest details. When they showed him CCTV of him taking a weird route, he claimed it was because he felt safer that way. I mean, these flimsy lies were a huge red flag to investigators that he was hiding something big. So with all this evidence stacking up against him, the CCTV, the financial records, traces of Grace's blood in his apartment, Kempson was totally cornered. He had no choice but to admit she had died in his room. But his confession came with a truly shocking and, frankly, twisted defense. His legal team went with what the media started calling the 50 Shades of Grey defense. Their argument was that Grace's death was a tragic accident that happened during a consensual but rough sexual encounter. They argued he shouldn't be charged with murder, but with the lesser charge of manslaughter. But his story just completely fell apart when you look at the evidence. Let's break it down. On one hand, he claims her death was a consensual accident and that he was just in shock. But the evidence? It tells a completely different story. Police found he'd searched for how to hide a body before he even met up with her. And far from being in shock, he took intimate photos of her body after she was dead and then casually went on another date. The contrast is just damning. The jury, well, they weren't buying it for a second. They completely rejected the whole consensual accident defense. After this huge trial that just gripped the entire nation, they came back with a unanimous and crystal clear verdict. Guilty. Guilty of the murder of Grace Millane. For this crime, he was sentenced to life in prison. The judge set what's called a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. That stark number, 17, is the absolute least amount of time he has to spend behind bars before he can even be considered for release. But the story doesn't even stop there. All the publicity from the trial gave 2 other women the courage to come forward with their own stories of being assaulted by Kempson. He was tried and found guilty on those charges too, which revealed what prosecutors had suspected all along. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a clear and dangerous pattern of predatory behavior. The case of Grace Millane is, of course, a terrible tragedy about a life cut way too short. But the way her killer was caught, using CCTV, credit card receipts, cell phone data, it really serves as this powerful case study in modern justice. And it leaves us with a pretty critical question. In a world where our digital footprint tracks pretty much our every move, is the perfect crime becoming impossible?